Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Sherry from the Finchley N3 N12 Pollinator Project. We are a group of volunteers working in Finchley, Barnet, that's in North London. And our aim is to improve the local habitat for pollinators in our community. And we are very lucky to have the support of Scarlett, Weston, and she's from a national charity called Buglife, focusing on specifically on a local project, local to London, called Get London Buzzing. She's a project officer and very knowledgeable about everything to do with pollinators. We're really, really happy and very lucky to have her support. Scarlett also physically helped us to transform a turf grass area in a local school called Frith Manor Primary School into a meadow. It was quite a hard, quite hard work, but we were very lucky to also have many volunteers from the community. And the idea is that this is all part of our Autumn 23 project, which is called Buzzy Bulbs and Meadows. We always have fun when we need to make up the names to for our projects. So Buzzy Bulbs and Meadows is all about bulbs and meadows. So this specifically today is about meadow creation and management. And the idea behind the webinar is to give a bit more information than we were able to share during the in-person experience last week. So thank you very much, Scarlett. And Scarlett will be doing the webinar today. And if you can put any questions into the chat, and we will try to leave some time for questions at the end.
Yeah, I will try my best to answer them all. So let me just share my screen. Can you see that okay? Yeah, okay, wonderful. Fantastic, thank you, Sheree. Yeah, so my name is Scarlett. I work for Buglife, as Sheree mentioned, and it's been fantastic working with Finchley Pollinator Project. And yeah, we've managed to coordinate a couple of events now. So looking forward to doing this webinar today.
No, I mean this looks like a good view from my point.
Okay. What I could quickly just recap and then we can start the recording from oh no, because we've got the introduction. So anyway, yeah, sorry about that. So yeah, I focus specifically on pollinators, and many of our fruits, vegetables, nuts, even chocolate relies on insect pollination. So in fact, 1 in 3 mouthfuls of our food relies on these pollinating insects. And it's 90% of our wild crop species which are insect pollinated. So this enables us to put an economic worth on the ecosystem service that they're providing. And worldwide, this is 132 billion per annum. So they're incredibly important. And many of our plants can't set seed without the insects visiting them. So 80% of our wildflowers here in the UK rely on insects. And these plants and flowers then in turn provide food and shelter for other species of insects as well as birds and mammals. So it's almost impossible to overemphasize the importance of these species and the services they're providing for us. Now, what are our pollinators? When we talk about pollinators, we often think of bees primarily. But butterflies and moths also pollinate. Our flies, including hoverflies, are fantastic pollinators, as well as beetles and even wasps. So approximately 6,000 different species are regular flower visitors in the UK. And of these, we have 1,500 butterflies and moths, 1,500 flies, 250 beetles, and 270 species of bee. Now, bees are our most significant pollinators, followed by flies and hoverflies, then butterflies and moths. And our bees are the most important, or the most significant, sorry, because they're actually purposely visiting these flowers to collect the pollen rather than just drinking the nectar. So looking at bees in a little bit more detail, I think most people kind of think of our honeybee being our sort of most important pollinator, or the first one that kind of comes to mind. They can live in colonies of up to 40,000 individuals. They have the queen with the workers and the males, and they all work together to maintain their nest. And they certainly get a lot of press when pollination is mentioned, but they do tend to be farmed, and their hives are managed by humans for their honey. And when we introduce a hive into an area, this is 40,000 individuals that are kind of being introduced that can pose competition for some of our native bees. So that's just something that we certainly need to think about here in London. We have quite a high hive density per area, and we recommend at Buglife that you plant an additional 2 hectares or 2 football pitches of wildflower habitat per every additional hive, to kind of ensure that you're not creating any competition for those floral resources. Moving on to bumblebees. So bumblebees live in colonies of between 50 to 400 individuals, depending on the species. So they're much smaller than our honeybees, but they are also social insects. And they make their nests just below ground. They may use old mammal burrows. They might nest in tussocky grasses. And the one species we have, the tree bumblebee, will make use of trees, and you might see it nesting in kind of old bird boxes, although they would usually use kind of the tree hollows more naturally. And then the other 245 species of bee in the UK are our lesser known solitary bees. So as their name suggests, they don't live in a colony. Each female solitary bee provisions her own nest, and they can sometimes nest in aggregations. So if you get a bee hotel, you might see lots of them nesting in that one bee hotel next to each other, but they're not working together. So each female is doing her a nest in each kind of, yeah, if it's a bee hotel, in each bamboo cane, for example. And there's a huge diversity in these bees. So we've got ones with lovely yellow faces. This here's the pantaloon bee, which is named after these kind of furry trousers that it's got on its back legs. Silvery leafcutter bee has these beautiful green eyes. We even have metallic green bees. This one's tiny, it's like the size of the tip of my finger. We have sharp-tailed bees, which are kind of these black and white bandits of the bees, because they have this sharp tail on their abdomen, which they'll use to pierce other bees' nests and sneak their eggs inside, so they don't actually have to collect pollen and provision a nest. So they're a kind of type of cuckoo bee. And blood bees, which, yeah, sounds kind of sinister, but it's just because of this beautiful red color on their abdomen. So there's a huge diversity in how they look, where they nest. So many might nest in the ground, digging in sandy soil. So if you've ever seen kind of like the little volcanoes, tiny volcanoes on the ground, or little molehills, that's probably a mining bee. They can nest, yeah, in patches of bare ground or amongst short grass. We also have species that nest aerially, so they might use old walls or dead plant stems, dead wood, even kind of, yeah, more man-made in our urban environment in London. They will make use of holes in the walls and even parasols and things like this. So the other thing as well is that these species, they kind of greatly visit in the plants that they visit to take food from. So some can be much more generalist and feed from many different types of flowers, but some are very specific and will only take pollen from a very select number of flowers. So that's one thing to always be thinking as well with improving your floral diversity, to kind of host a greater array of species. And one thing I will note here is that the area these species can travel varies greatly as well. So some bees can fly up to 1 kilometer, some of our bumblebees. which is actually incredible considering how small they are. But the average distance a solitary bee can fly from its nest is 300 meters. So that's quite a short distance when you think that they need to have absolutely everything they need within that range, and when you start thinking about them moving through the landscape. So unfortunately, there's a problem. Our pollinators are in decline. So half of our 27 bumblebee species are in decline, and 7 have declined by more than 50% in the last 25 years. Obviously, a couple of slides ago, I said there's 25 bumblebee species, because 2 of them have gone extinct. So that's how severe those declines are. 2/3 of our moths and 71% of our butterflies are in long-term decline, and across Europe 38% of our bee and hoverfly species are in decline, with only 12% increasing. And when we look at our flying insects kind of in total as a group, they've declined by 59% between 2004 and 2021. So we're seeing these huge declines across the board. Actually, in this photo, this is the short-haired bumblebee. So this is one of our bumblebee species that has gone extinct. There was a project by Bumblebee Conservation Trust to kind of reintroduce it, because there's species that live in New Zealand and Sweden and other places in Europe. They haven't managed to reintroduce it, so it is still extinct. But they had a fantastic project that created lots of hectares from all of our species. So when we're looking at why our pollinators are in decline, habitat loss is kind of the major factor. When we've since the 1940s, we've lost 97% of our flower-rich grassland, and this leaves no food and no nesting places for our pollinators. And one of the kind of leading causes of this has been the intensification of agriculture. So we're looking at this field of countryside, and we see fields of green and nature, but this is a monoculture that's not got these flower-rich resources for lots of our pollinators and other species. And kind of with our technological advances, we're much more efficient at farming now. Weed species, quote unquote weed species, which are many of our wildflowers, are more efficiently cleaned out of these systems. We've increased our field sizes, and we just kind of use a lot more space, and we've seen the increase of pesticides and herbicides used in these systems. And as well as in the countryside, also we've had increasing urbanization, and this has led to habitat fragmentation. So we do have these kind of pockets of really good wildflower-rich habitat left, but they can be isolated from each other, and it can be difficult for the species to move in between. So within our urban spaces, we kind of have an expectation for things to be neat and tidy, and we have a lot of areas of kind of short mown grass and nothing else. But we are seeing changes in this, changes with the councils in letting areas grow, and there's things that you can do in your own garden that can change this, moving away from astroturf, or paving over gardens for car parking spaces. We can still create these habitats within our urban areas. And one thing to note with pesticides in the gardens is that well, I guess hopefully we wouldn't be using them, but even organic ones, they are still designed to kill species, so we should kind of refrain from using all pesticides. And I saw this when I was out in London, and I just thought this was quite a nice picture to demonstrate, even if there are lots of areas in around London that where they do have this kind of short mown grass or this area, you can kind of create a haven within these spaces. The garden next door is overflowing with flowers, and it's going to be a fantastic place for pollinators. So it's a matter of, you know, everyone can kind of make a difference. Now I'm going to try and play this video. Sheree, let me know if we can hear it. So that would be great.
We all see wildflowers as beautiful and great for our well-being, but for the thousands of pollinating insects that share this land with us, wildflowers are vital. But there's a problem. Pollinators are finding themselves in isolated oases, walled in by agricultural land, urban landscapes, roads and gardens. What humans see as neat and tidy, insects see as desert. Since 1940, we've lost 97% of our flower-rich meadows, and hundreds of our pollinator species are in decline. At Buglife, we have come up with a beautiful solution to the problem: beelines, a network of insect pathways along which we are restoring and creating wildflower-rich habitat. These insect superhighways will extend across the whole of the UK, allowing wildlife to move freely through our countryside and towns. But we need your help to make it happen. Restoring fields of wildflowers. Making space for wildlife in our towns, on road verges, local parks or gardens. Mowing the lawn less often. It's the easiest thing you can do for your local pollinators. Or how about planting a wildflower meadow in your local park or school? Then add your project to the Beelines map. Help us make our network of habitats bigger, better and more joined up. Find out more at buglife.org.uk. Saving the small things that run the planet.
Yeah, so oh, can go to the
We all
okay. So yeah, we have these this network of beelines, which is kind of, you know, a framework of where we can prioritize habitat creation, wildflower rich habitat creation, to connect our urban spaces and agriculture so that species can move freely. And we have two beelines running through London. So yeah, it's kind of a fantastic opportunity to be adding pollinator projects to London, and to coincide with launching one of our new beelines. My project was started, Get London Buzzing, and we're looking to create opportunities for people who live and work in London to help pollinating insects in their local area. And this project is kindly funded by Green the UK, Consumer Trust and Milky Wire. So a brief overview of my project, looking to create 5 hectares of wildflower-rich habitat across London. So we're working outside the beelines as well, and leaving landowners with management plans to ensure that they can continue to support pollinators long after the project has ended, giving one-to-one management advice, developing habitat guidance documents to give to councils so we can kind of transform some of our more traditionally managed spaces. Also working in local primary schools in East London, creating wildflower habitat on the school grounds of the children and training them how to survey for pollinators. We've also, yeah, delivering a series of events, so workshops as well to kind of create this pollinator friendly habitat in gardens. And been partnering with different organisations through this and through delivering these, and Finchley Pollinators as one of those. And yeah, we did a webinar before on creating nesting habitat for pollinators, which you can find on YouTube, so you can watch the recording there. And today we're talking about how to kind of create that all-important restaurant of wildflower-rich habitat for our pollinators now that we've got their houses sorted out. And this is following on from our Make a Meadow event, which we had at Frith Manor Primary School last week. It was, yeah, a fantastic event. We had wonderful weather. We had a lovely community group turnout, and yeah, it was. I think it worked, yeah, really nicely. Having, you know, an area where people could get involved in different activities, and then we were running the demonstration, and everyone pitched in. It was fantastic. We managed to convert quite a big area of the school grounds, and it will be a wildflower rich habitat in the future. So yeah, it was really lovely day. And I'm just gonna kind of go over, I guess, what I was talking about there, but with a bit more detail. So What is a wildflower meadow? Well, it's a common misconception that any gathering of flowers is a meadow. Here we're talking about what would have been a traditional hay meadow, so native perennial wildflowers, with approximately 80% grass, 20% flowers. They used to be used in the winter to grow food for livestock over winter, and they've kind of declined as we've changed our agricultural processes. They're no longer necessary. But wildflower meadows, yeah, can be very different, and it depends on the soil, topography, management. So here's another example of a wildflower meadow that looks quite different. And we've got another one here. So they can have these different floral compositions, but they've got these perennial wildflowers. And then what is not a traditional wildflower meadow is this is a collection of just cornfield annuals. So they're beautiful colored, brightly colored native plants, and these are the ones that I was saying used to be the weeds of the agricultural system. They are still can be a fantastic addition, especially in our urban environments. They're wonderful to have this kind of pop of color, but just to note that if you are doing an annual meadow, you need to resow every single year. They will die, and they also need to be exposed to, you need to turn it over to bare soil every year, because that's where they were growing when we turn over the soil, and they grow on this kind of in the agriculture. So they need bare soil, and they need to be resown every year. And this is also not a wildflower meadow. This is kind of more of a pictorial mix, so a mix of native and non-native annuals and perennials. It's brightly colored, and it's got a longer flowering season. So this is really good for garden borders, because there's non-native species. It's not suitable in the wider countryside, but in our urban areas and urban gardens, this can be a fantastic mix. We do prefer native species. So what we planted at Frith Manor Primary School, we planted a UK provenance pollinator friendly mix. So we had the mix of annuals and perennials, going for this beautiful bright colours, and all the species were planted were perfect for pollinators, and these are all UK native species that we planted. And there are a few different ways to create a wildflower meadow. So there's natural regeneration, enhancing an existing site, or kind of starting from scratch, so sowing wildflower seed, which is often what we use in garden and urban environments. Now, natural regeneration, it's kind of, it can be best to do this before you do anything else. Even in the garden, you can just leave an area to grow for a summer and see what things flower. And you can count how many different flowers you see during the year. You could keep a note. And if you're reaching kind of, about 5 different species, then you can just carry on and let things happen naturally with correct management. So it's often there are these seeds in the seed bank just waiting, and if you actually let it grow, you can see them come out. If you're interested in aesthetics of a garden, you can kind of you can first assess and see what comes through, but just to sort of note that a traditional wildflower meadow isn't particularly showy. It's got these perennial species, and so it kind of depends where you're coming from, what your priority is, but this can be a very cost-effective method, and it's the best option for our wider countryside. This is just to note, so this is a picture from Frith Manor Primary School, the short grass, cut grass, where we were seeding, and within that I just did a quick survey before we did it, and we had 10 different species of wildflower amongst that grass, which you you might not suspect as being there. So it is, we could have let it grow naturally and seen what's come up as well. And it's part of the reason why we did the ground preparation method as well. We'll come to that. The other way to create a wildflower meadow is to enhance an existing site. So you might already have a site with some lovely wildflower meadows in, and through correct management, you can really enhance this. And maybe it's just a matter of introducing a few different plug plants to increase the flora diversity. You might want to plant specific wildflowers for rare pollinators if it's their food plants. So for example, this is the large scabious mining bee. This is a bee I was doing a project for before down in Cornwall, and it takes pollen solely from this field scabious. So lots of our habitat creation was a matter of just kind of plug planting. So that's something you can be thinking about, where you're local to, what species might really benefit from having a few different wildflowers popped in. And then the other way is sowing wildflower seeds. This is kind of more commonly seen in gardens and urban environments. Now, when natural regeneration isn't an option, this can work really well. And in some cases, you can just sow one seed. So that's this yellow rattle. It's kind of known as the meadow maker, and it's an annual native wildflower that's hemiparasitic on grass. So it takes some nutrients from grass, and because it is parasitic on them, it reduces the vigor of grass, and it can help the wildflowers compete against the grass and grow up, and you get lots of different species coming through because of this. So you can so yellow rattle, and then see what comes up as well. You could just do this one and then see what kind of naturally regenerates. But this species needs a period of cooling for germination. So if you are sowing yellow rattle, you want to sow it in autumn through up to Christmas. You can sow yellow rattle because it actually needs a period of frost to break the outer bit of the seed so that it can germinate. The other thing you can sow is seed mixes. So local provenance is always best. And if you're in the countryside, you would be thinking as local as possible. So, maybe from a nearby field or your own land, you would be getting landowners' permission to harvest the seed and then sprinkle. But in gardens and urban areas, kind of UK provenance seed is seen to be good. So there's different seed suppliers that you can use, and if you want any recommendations, you can email me afterwards. I've got my email at the end of the presentation. But yeah, you can we recommend getting UK provenance and primarily native species. And if you're depending on the method that you use to prepare your ground, you might want to get 100% wildflower seeds, or you might want to have a grass mix. So generally speaking, if you're leaving the grass roots intact, then you only have to buy 100% wildflower seed. But grasses are a vital food plant for many invertebrates, like our caterpillars and things like this. So we do want grasses in the mix. But yeah, if it depends on if you're going to have grass roots already there, then you can get the 100% seed mix. And the seeds will kind of dictate at what sowing rate you sow per meter. So, for example, you might be sowing 3 grams per meter square. And one tip is to sow it with sharp sand. So sharp sand's really good to help you get an even spread. You can see where you've sown, and it just kind of helps you cover the whole area. So that's what we were doing at the event here. This is Frith Manor again. Preparing your area for seeding. So you want to kind of select an open and sunny site for most wildflower mixes. If you are looking to create wildflowers in more shaded areas, then you'll need to think specifically about shade tolerant species. Again, if you want any advice, then do email me. But size doesn't matter. We kind of any area that you can convert to wildflowers would be fantastic. But the timing is incredibly important. So this can be one of the main reasons for failure. It needs to be in autumn. Most seed mixes we want to sow in autumn before the frosts, so that the wildflowers can establish before a frost comes in. So we'd be thinking kind of September, October. And you'd want them to be able to grow so that when the first frosts come, they have a chance of surviving that. And again, if you're thinking about sowing in spring, you'd want to be sowing after the major frosts, so more March, April time, so that you know again that they're not going to get knocked back when you've just put the seed in the ground. You don't want to kind of lose all of that. And when you're preparing ground, we say that the minimum is 30% of bare ground. We were looking, you want at least 30 to 40% bare ground when you're preparing, because the wildflower seeds want to make contact with bare ground to germinate. And there's lots of different options. It depends on the size of the area and your budget, and I'm going to review some of these now. So turf stripping is an example. It removes all the vegetation. It reduces competition from other plants, but it can be expensive, especially on large areas. When you were sowing into these bits that have been stripped, you'd want a grass and wildflower mix. And there's also, just to note, you wouldn't want to be sowing yellow rattle in this area, or there's not much point because there's no grass roots established for them to parasitize from, so then the yellow rattle wouldn't establish. So those are the kind of seed mix you'd be looking to plant if you want to do this. It can be really good in small garden areas, if you want to grow a bit more of a wildflower maze or have kind of a point of interest. You can also as well lay wildflower turf instead of seed, so you can buy ready-made wildflower turf, and you can use those with this method. Another ground preparation method is rotivating or stone burrowing. Both of these methods turn the grass roots into the soil. So it kind of, stone burrowing kind of flips the turf and leaves a nice seeding surface, and rotivating can be a bit more messy, leave the ground very uneven. Both can be quite expensive on large sites, and there's not necessarily a benefit over other methods. But in this, if you were to do this method of ground preparation, you'd want to be sowing 100% wildflower seed, because you have the grass roots already there. The one thing with this method is it can disturb undesirable species. For example, if you have lots of docks being a problem species, you might not want to use this method. Power harrowing, a machine that turns over the very top of the soil surface. This leaves the roots largely intact, and this can be a good option on large scale. And you'd plant 100% wildflower seeds in with this. Kind of, a kind of scale down, I guess, is chain harrowing. So you might have a tractor or a ride-on lawnmower dragging a chain harrow behind, and this can be very effective, but it can take you going over quite a lot of times to get enough of the bare ground, and this doesn't disturb the soil. So if you do have those problem weeds, this is a good method for this one, because you're not disturbing the soil too much, so you're not going to see these seeds popping up all over the place, and it leaves the ground quite flat. And you'd be sowing 100% wildflower seed mix into this. And scarifying or raking, it's basically the manual version of chain harrowing. So it's not necessarily ideal on large sites, but this is very effective, and this might be one that if you've got a garden or an urban space, you might be thinking of using. So it can be very effective for sowing seeds through the lawn. And you know, if you do have a slightly larger area, maybe you would look at getting a scarifier, but yeah, otherwise you can use a rake to kind of manually do this process of exposing the bare ground, so that the wildflower seeds can make contact on there. And this is what we were doing at Frith Manor, and it was, yeah, very labor intensive, but we had a lot of volunteers. They did a fantastic job. We got at least 30% bare ground, and up to 50% in quite a few of those areas, so that was quite good. And when we were raking it, there was a lot of moss and a lot of grass thatch, so that all came up. So it was a big effort, but yeah, it was fantastic. And this is on the right. You can kind of see the sand, the sharp sands, which would have the seeds mixed in, where we sprinkled afterwards onto the ground. And this is really great for converting lawn or garden. The other method you can do is digging, which I guess is, yeah, basically turf stripping for garden projects. So you know, it's a good option in flower beds, or where you're not kind of sowing seeds through grass. So you're turning over the soil, and if you already have an existing flower bed, and that's the area where you're doing this digging, you would want to weed it first and rake to loosen the soil, and then, you know, have it level and you can seed onto there. If it's just a small area, then you can just have this 100% seed mix, if you're thinking it's a flower bed. But otherwise I would include a grass and wildflower seed mix for areas that have kind of been dug over. And perhaps you're thinking, I can kind of reclaim a sort of wild overgrown area at the end of the garden. You know, it's good to have some nettles and leaf spaces untidy, but maybe you want to kind of, you know, clear a patch. You'd be looking to dig up the roots of the weeds that would outcompete your wildflowers. But if you have lots of nettles or docks or thistles, your soil likely has too much nutrients for wildflowers to kind of get that competitive edge within. So what I would recommend, if you had a really if you had a site kind of like this, is to remove the topsoil 15%, 15 centimeters of the topsoil. So you're really taking out those nutrients. You could then sow in your mix, and you can see these establish, and you can keep the nutrients down throughout the years through management. So that's kind of this, like, it can't be overemphasized how important management is to the establishment of wildflower meadows. It's vital to the success, and it needs to be done every year. So on, you know, large scale areas, and more traditionally, you'd have tractors kind of coming and doing a cut and collect, but we'd be, you know, in our gardens or in our local green spaces, we might be thinking more of a cut and collect lawnmower. And what's really important is to collect up these cuttings and take them off the site and compost them somewhere nearby. We need to remove the nutrients to keep it low, because that's where the wildflowers thrive, in this nutrient low soil. And they're kind of, you know, adapted to have that competitive edge over lots of our weeds and our grasses. So that's why it's so important. And each year you remove the cuttings, because otherwise they can kind of sit there and they compost on the surface and add a lot of nutrients. So you're removing them, and then each year you will see an improvement on your wildflower meadow. And ideally, when this should happen, so it needs to happen at the end of the growing season. You want all of your flowers to have flowered and set seed and drop their seed. And this allows the life cycles to be completed. It will help to encourage more plants and more insects to enjoy your meadow. So, you know, at the end of the year, so you might be thinking kind of September, October, you can do this cut, and you'd want to cut it once right down to the ground level, and then take those cuttings away. You can do it slightly earlier, and people do it slightly earlier in the year, and this just gets a different plant community, but you do run the risk of kind of losing these late flowering wildflowers, so late flowering species, such as the field scabious we've seen before. But yeah, it wants to be left uncut between April and September ideally. And if you are doing a large area, then it's great to consider not cutting the whole area at once and leaving an uncut margin that gets cut every kind of 2 or 3 years on rotation. And this allows shelter for wildlife. This means that they've got those stems to nest in over winter, and that kind of area that it's not like there's this huge dramatic loss, and there might be some still flowers that they can feed from. So yeah, if you've got a larger area, I would consider leaving an uncut margin. But just to say as well, you would want to cut them, yeah, every 2 years or 3 years so that they don't scrub over. And yeah, the key thing to note is that this takes time. So it's not a matter of kind of sowing the seeds and you know, they flower and that's it, done. It's a process, and it can be really fun to watch. You can see all these different flowers coming up at different points in the year. You know, if you use a mix like we did at Frith Manor, in the first year you get these annuals come through, that pop of colour. You're not going to see your perennial species until the following year. But then yeah, you might start to see them after the first or second year. And it can take you know, 5 to 10 years to get a fully established wildflower meadow. And that's why management is so important moving forward. So you will start to see things from year 2, but whether you would label it as a wildflower meadow, you know, it needs to have this management. So you have the cut and collect once, but also one thing to notice as well is that throughout the year you need to weed out species if there's like fast growing ones, even if they're species that you ultimately want there. If one's starting to dominate, you want to think about that. You're thinking increased floral diversity. So even if you're getting lots of flowers and you think that's great, if it's all one kind, then we kind of want to think about weeding those back so that we can have a greater diversity. And you can whether you have like botany identification skills, you can still be surveying this, so you can kind of be making notes of the number of kind of colors of flowers and different shapes. You can kind of you know, get a rough note. So you know, you might not know what any of these species are, but you can clearly see, okay, we've got these white umbellifers here, we've got the pink ones. So you can kind of take these proxy notes and see how it's progressing. And I just thought I'd go over kind of the common problems that people ask about. So some key issues is the timing. So ensuring the seeds are sown at the correct time. If they're sown in spring, they kind of they need that period of cooling. So species that needed a period of cooling won't germinate in that first year. And the seedlings might be quickly overcome by grass. So in the first year of sowing, you can do like an early cut as well in kind of May or June of the first year and cut it down, but you'd want to keep, you know, maybe 7 centimeters, and that's so you've got these little seedlings that are growing. You don't want to cut those down, so you cut it on like the highest length that your lawnmower can do, but it'll just knock back those grasses, and you wouldn't want to be doing it much later than that, because you don't want to be cutting your wildflowers down. But it's just if you've kind of had issues with getting it established in the past, that could be something to consider, having one early cut in the first year. Ground preparation, so minimum 30% is vital, and you can be aiming for 40 to 50%, but minimum 30% bare soil. And if you know, if you're doing the scarifying, you know, maybe you're thinking about 50% bare soil. Persistent weeds can be an issue. So if you have a plant such as the docks pictured here that you don't want to encourage to spread, obviously docks, you know, are fantastic species. It's just if they're kind of, you know, dominating, then that's when I would really recommend using either chain harrowing or scarifying the soil, so that you're not disturbing these weed seeds. Waterlogging is another common problem. So if an area is periodically waterlogged, then don't seed into it, because the seeds will just rot over winter. And management is kind of, you know, the most common thing, but you know, it just a reminder, I guess, that it does need to be done every year. And I just wanted to finish up by saying, you know, that it's fantastic to create these areas of wildflower-rich habitat and have these big meadow areas, but even if you can only pop out like a flower pot or a window box, you are creating this little pollinator pit stop. These species can fly 300 meters, some of these solitary bees, so you are giving them that little stop so that they can move through this habitat and they can kind of get to other good sites. So it's a source of nectar and pollen for them, so it's just, yeah, it's still a fantastic addition. And if you're planting a container, just make sure you have the drainage holes, the stones along the bottom, and only use peat-free compost. We really recommend using peat-free to kind of prevent the destruction of our peat bogs, which are not only vital wildlife habitat for many endangered invertebrates, but they also are a good carbon store. So we really push that you use peat-free. But what we're trying to do is just provide this continuous succession of pollinators from spring through to autumn. You can use native and non-native mixes in your gardens. You just want this bigger diversity. Greater floral diversity equals greater biodiversity. So we just want that diversity. You can just, even if you can't create an area, just leave your lawn a little longer. You know, just mow it less, and you can see things like clovers and daisies and dandelions come in. Or maybe you just kind of mow around some flowers. There's different ways of doing it, but you know, no action is kind of too small with these. And you know, to recap what we covered in the other webinar, providing nesting and shelter you can also do. So you can have natural nesting places like hollow stems, deadwood, but bee hotels, bee banks, and it's just kind of a matter of leaving areas undisturbed, not being too tidy, just having a place that's wild and that's for the pollinators rather than for humans. And at the event we were handing out the seed bombs, so hopefully some of you also came to the event. So just you can go and plant your wildflower seed bomb. We have the guidance here, which are hopefully, Cherie, we can share with everyone afterwards, so that you can kind of have this sort of step-by-step guide. But it's very simple. It's just, yeah, you just plant those wildflowers and you can cut them once a year and monitor those areas, and it can be making a huge difference. And to link back to our beelines works, we would absolutely love to see any kind of pollinator projects that you've done. You can add them as a point on our map, and you can see how you might think, oh, I'm just doing this area in my garden, but it connects with people doing this all over the country, and this provides these areas for pollinators to move through our landscape and connect the habitat for them. And yeah, it's up on our website here, but again, we'll share this link. And yeah, this is me. So thank you for listening. Please do ask me any questions now. But if you want to follow up and email me, my email address is here. I'm happy for that to be shared as well. And I can yeah, I can stop sharing this so we can take any questions. There we go. We're back. I can share this into the chat as well. Let me just do that. Second.
So someone asked, so thank you so much. This has been such a great presentation. Someone asked whether you can share your slides with everyone who registered.
Yes, yeah, I would be more than happy to. Yeah, we did that for the webinar as well. We can circulate those afterwards. Yeah, we'll have the recording up on YouTube, and I'm more than happy to share the slides as well. Ooh, is that some links there? So those are some links there that are helpful that I mentioned in the talk, and then I'll also pop my wildlife.org.uk. So if you have any questions, you can email me as well afterwards. Oh, so sharp sand, it is different to builder's sand, and the reason I recommend sharp sand is just because its texture, it's less clumpy, so it really helps with sewing. But if you went into, I don't know if I should plug names of businesses, but B&Q or something like this, it's very clearly labeled as sharp sand on the packet, and yeah, I would recommend that as kind of the best one to sow wildflower with.
Timothy has a question. What do you think about using tarp to clear the weeds?
Yeah, so this can be really effective. I see yeah, lots of people kind of cut it back and then put the tarp on for a bit so that it kills it back. If this is if you've got kind of the reason I guess I haven't really covered it is if you've got weeds, for example, like the nettles, like the thistles, or my mind's going blank, docks. If you suppress them, they are an indicator that your soil is likely to be rich. So it is good to remove that nutrient-rich soil anyway, because otherwise you're going to see kind of these more competitive weeds establish. And then just also to note, I guess there's a lot of species that we consider weeds that are actually fantastic for pollinators. So ragwort, there's a lot of species that specialist on ragwort, and it's a really fantastic species for them. Same with, you know, dandelions, hawkbits, yeah, there's kind of, yeah, or sort of lots of those yellow composite flowers. There's lots that we consider weeds, but that are, yeah, really good for pollinators. So if we can have, you know, some weeds and increase that diversity, that can work that way. Yes, I would be happy to share. Oh, I just covered half of the message. Hang on, let me make the chat a bit bigger. Yes, I can share the list of perennial plants. So we put in 26 species. I would be happy to share that with you. Absolutely, yeah. That's no problem. It's on the slides as well, I think. So if I share the slides, I'm just double checking. Yeah, so when I said what we planted, it's got the pictures of them. Yeah, I will share the list of the names as well. Yeah, that's no problem. Ideal pH levels for natives in a meadow. So I don't know if there's meant to be a set ideal. So I've worked, it can change which grassland you have, so it changes what species. So if you were in a kind of, you know, more acidic area, like lots of the coastal areas where I was working in Cornwall, maybe slightly more acidic, you see different plants thrive. So I guess I'm not sure if there's an ideal pH, but you might change which species you're looking to plant, dependent on if you have more acidic or more alkali soil. So obviously, yeah, you wouldn't want them too acidic or too alkali, but but it just kind of changes the species composition. So yeah, if you kind of had an idea of whether you had more acidic or more alkali soils, or if you had a specific pH measurement, then I can check that for you. But yeah, I can if you want kind of specific advice based on pH, let me know. I can go away and look at what exact species miss might be best for you. Yeah, but just off the top of my head, I'm not entirely sure. I know that it will change the composition. So you mentioned oh,
First a question, are native wildflowers
Oh.
in England okay for Scotland?
So well, in Scotland you would want to plant your native Scotland species ideally, but we kind of, yeah, we often use it depends where you're planting, of course, but in urban environments we tend to use UK provenance, so it's not necessarily that it's from England. UK provenance we kind of say is a good benchmark, and that's if you're in your garden. But as I mentioned, if you're in kind of wider countryside, then you certainly you know, as local as possible, and you wouldn't want to be just planting kind of any seeds. So I would say if you're in a garden environment, then UK provenance is fine. So English provenance would be fine for Scotland, and vice versa. Hopefully that's clear. What just thinking, did I miss? Clearly. So yeah, so you mentioned sowing in September after the late flowering species. Can we leave that to the end of winter? So yes, some insects overwinter in areas, but we do recommend doing it kind of in September or October, the majority of the cut, so that after they've set the seed, we're taking away those plants and we're taking away the nutrients to reduce the nutrients. So that's why we recommend that timing. But that's why you're completely right. Insects do overwinter in areas, and you don't want to harm them. So having a strip where they can move to and overwinter there, in that kind of area, that's what works best. But you also would want to make sure you rotate where that strip is and cut that every 2 to 3 years, so that it's not shrubbing over and you're still like maintaining wildflower meadow. Hopefully that's clear. But yeah, the September, October is kind of when you would be looking to sow as well. But yeah, in the yeah, that's when you'd be looking to sow, and you want to be cutting at the end as well. I can't see any more questions. I guess we can yeah, but like I said, hopefully that's clear, and if you have any follow-up questions, yeah, please do email me. Would chamomile be a good alternative to lawn border around? Chamomile's a wonderful plant. There's definitely pollinators that feed on it. It's beautiful. It smells lovely. You can drink it in your tea. So it's definitely a lovely alternative to a lawn border. The only thing I would say is well, I would say, yeah, if that's what you want, definitely go ahead and do that. But also we were thinking about with a wildflower meadow, just having kind of a greater diversity of floral species kind of can support a greater amount of pollinators. But if you want to turn your lawn to chamomile patch, I think that's a fantastic idea, and it definitely will be yeah, better than a lawn. So yeah. Oh, thank you. Nice comments as well. So I guess we wouldn't have much more time for questions, but as I say, please do follow up if you have any on emails. I will make sure that I share the slides and the recording and did I say something else as well? Oh, the get London buzzing sheet. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Scarlett. This is our second webinar that you're doing for us, and similar to the one before, it was very informative, but also easy to understand and in really great order as well. So thank you so much. It was really, really great. If you're local to Finchley or to Barnet, we have loads of events coming up. Please do join us. They're free. For example, we are doing bulb lasagnas, where we give you everything you need to prepare a pot full with at least like 18 or 20 bulbs in layers, and then you get to take it home, and that provides that small pit stop for pollinators. As Scarlett mentioned, you know, one pot can make a big difference for pollinators who are traveling and looking for some nectar and some pollen. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it. We'll send you everything in a few days, as well as a link to our YouTube channel where you can share this presentation with other people. Thank you. Take care. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. I'll end the meeting now. Wonderful. Thank you.